I'm Julie Thompson. Welcome to the Plymouth Select Board candidate interview. I want to take a moment to thank our candidate for participating in this interview and collaborating with PACTV to bring this informational programming to residents and voters this election season. Let me explain the format. We will be conducting a one-on-one interview-style Q&A format with each candidate, lasting at the most 45 minutes. Responses will not be timed, and follow-up questions may be asked during this format. We aim to ask up to 5 questions, but that will depend on the length of the responses, along with any follow-up discussion during this exchange. Candidates will be allowed to address anything not covered or that they would like to add clarification to at the end of the interview in their closing remarks. Let's get started. Today we're speaking with Frank Mant, one of the 6 candidates for 2 seats for the Plymouth Select Board in the Plymouth Town election. Frank, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to dive right into the questions. Okay,
Jump in.
We're going to start with question number 1. I'm going to start my timer. Capital expenses and budgeting. Every year, budgets are prepared, debated, recalculated, and finally presented to town meeting for approval. Salaries and benefits, town-owned buildings, and ongoing capital expenditures are often debated, and there are always projects or initiatives that do not get funded each year. The Select Board is required to review the annual and capital budgets. What parameters do you use in determining which budgetary items you will support and which you will not?
Well, I've never been a member of the town meeting or had the ability to vote on that, but I really value the process itself, the exchange that happens at town meeting through the caucuses and things like that. So, though I think in general, in the past, though there are certain things that I'm largely in favor of, certain processes and all, I really take my cue from town meeting and from the process that happens. I think you have to look at the bottom line. You have to understand how this is going to affect not just the short term, but especially the long term. But I'm generally somebody that's kind of issue-driven or topic-driven. So issues such as the environment are very important to me because I think we undervalue that in this community. Issues that are dealing with quality of life for everyone, wherever it's possible to affect the way that we're developing, the quality, the character of life we have in the town. I think those are things that I tune into. But overall, the bottom line budget, I don't have a set of hard and fast criteria. I think probably as a select person, I probably have to have more specific things. But at the same time, as a select person, you have direct advisors, consultants, the town manager, the brilliant Lynn Barrett, and people like that give you the insights. But ultimately, you have to make a decision on, as a select person, on what you think is in the best interest of the community, whatever the bottom line is there. If it moves the community forward and protects and preserves the quality of life we have and fulfills the promises that are inherently made by this community, especially this community, to the public at large, to newcomers and old-timers as well, I think that's the criteria that I pay most attention to.
Now, what about items that come up that were not expected? Things that happened, the sewer main broke years ago. As a select person, you'll be on the front lines of having to determine what do we do with that.
Right.
How would you approach things like that?
Well, one of the things I think we need to do as a town overall and the select board specifically is have a more open process. And I won't say that the present board is non-transparent. I just think we could do a much better job of transparency. And a big part of that would probably be opening things up early instead of waiting for reactions afterwards. I think sometimes decisions are made because people believe they have insights at town hall or on various boards, but they do so without the benefit of enough input from the community. I'd really like to see many of the issues that are confronting us right now be broadened in terms of the public's participation. Right now we have the big housing challenge from the so-called MBTA housing directive we're getting from the state. We have a master plan process that we're starting. We have many other important issues that I think the process is too closed. I would overemphasize inclusivity. I would overemphasize having more meetings, having more participation, of the people in the community. And I think then you do two things. You both hear important information, get a general sense of the community's desires, but you also make them understand that they're an important part of the process. And I think too often when people get in government or people outside government, it's polarized and each side is lobbying things against the other. And that eventually or ultimately deteriorates the process and makes us not able to accomplish what we could otherwise.
Right. And I think that's a noble, thing to think of, and I think all of government should be like that. Should be far more open and transparent. The question is, how do you, as a select board member, the budget would come from the town manager to you first, so the group of select people. You have an opportunity to study it yourselves, vet it yourselves before you bring and then you send it to finance. So at what point would you bring other people in to have eyes on before it follows that process?
From the beginning, beforehand. One of the things I've been thinking about, I'm not assuming I'm going to be elected, but if elected, I would like to have a regular group or maybe a rotating group that I meet with on a regular basis of regular citizens, residents of the town, to give me their unvarnished feedback on issues that I may not even know that are about to come into controversy or into the public. I mean, one of the most wonderful things that's happened to me in this campaign is I've gone to places like Red Brook, new communities, and what I have found is not ignorance, but assumptions on what this town offers, what they expect, what the promise of Plymouth is. And there's a big promise in being Plymouth that's made to everyone and appeals to everyone. And these people were enthusiastic. They weren't not pragmatic. As a matter of fact, a lot of the people in Red Brook were telling me things about how they were already a little disappointed that the ideals they thought Plymouth represented were not fully being acted on. And they're doing more things in their community or more active on these issues than maybe the town as a whole is. But I would really want to have, as a select person, a regular way, a consistent way of hearing feedback from the community. And I think the town government as well needs to do those kinds of things, needs to reach out and not only reach out to people for their feedback, but then acknowledge they receive that feedback. I think that's a real important aspect of government in general, and of course, to our town meeting representative form of government.
Okay, thank you. Question number 2 is about infrastructure. The town of Plymouth is massive in area. Infrastructure integrity is a complicated subject and includes the sourcing and delivery of water, the collection and transport of sewage, the upkeep of roads and bridges, just to name a few. What do you think are Plymouth's greatest challenges with its current infrastructure?
Well, one of the challenges is to understand infrastructure for what it is. It's not a panacea. It's not a road to the future of prosperity. Often what it is a way toward future taxes, more infrastructure, more services. So I think we need to be very conservative about where we bring infrastructure or how we bring it. Water is a particularly problematic issue. One thing I don't believe we're doing enough of is conserving water. If we conserved water, and there's a plan out there put by the Plymouth Water Conservation Committee that specifically could conservatively save enough money to save potentially one municipal well, which could be anywhere in the vicinity of $10 million. So I think conservation as well is an infrastructure issue. I differentiate between green infrastructure and gray infrastructure. If we have more green infrastructure, we can actually conserve funds, and it's also a mitigation against uncontrolled growth. Because if we have open space, if we have more ecotourism, then we necessarily have revenue, but not the growth that accompanies it or the infrastructure that accompanies it. I mean, yes, there are pragmatic things we need to do infrastructure-wise, and maintaining it, it's a cost we're never going to escape. We need to be innovative there, and I believe our DPW can be. We're having an issue right now, as you probably know, on Water Street. There's a long-standing attempt to remove a sewer line from the water, which of course you don't want it in the water of the harbor, and bring it up on Water Street. But the history of Water Street is such that it was all fill. And so every time they move in there and they dig in there, the land begins to move. Right. It's quite a challenge. So especially our old infrastructure, this colonial town, is something we've been dealing with for a long time and we'll have to continue. But I am wary of infrastructure for its own sake.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to question number 3. This is about the new proposed charter. After many months of meetings, input, and analysis, a duly elected group of Charter Commission members finalized their suggested changes to the Town of Plymouth's existing charter. Whether or not to adopt this new charter will be on the ballot on May 20th. Will you be voting yes or no on the adoption of this charter, and why?
Well, I could go on a long time about this. I am on the Charter Commission, as you know. I've been on it for now close to 2 years. So I think the process was open. I think the considerations were reasonable. I think the compromises were many. And I think the overall consensus of the group who voted 9-0 to put this forward was that it was a positive step forward. Now, there are many particular issues that I feel positive about. There's greater oversight, for example, oversight of the legislative process. It's a very simple thing, but we institutionalized it in the charter. That is the oversight of what happens at town meeting and ensuring that we follow up. In the past, that was difficult. In the past, there was kind of a chasm between town meetings' actions and what happened in government, whether they implemented these things. The Legislative Oversight Committee that we created in the charter would provide that oversight and that monitoring so that town meeting would be informed about the status of things they thought had been accomplished and sometimes are not accomplished. There's greater representation in the new charter. That is, there's 7 select board members, an increase of 2 overall, but 3 of them would be, as most people know, I think, would be district representatives. There's been some talk about how that would be difficult to do. Well, I don't really think it is, and we've created a process somewhat like the precinct process that created the 18 precincts when we needed to, that would create 3 6-precinct districts. And that would add additional representation, especially to areas outside of the downtown and established areas where I believe they need more representation, where I believe they need a greater voice in what's going on in the community. And because by the nature of our community, the fact that we have the legacy of 1620, we pay an awful lot of attention to the downtown and to that historic legacy. And I think sometimes that tilts the table toward those precincts to the north and along the water and doesn't give enough attention to the southern precincts. There's an awful lot going on in the rest of the town that I think we need to pay attention to.
So would those extra 3 select board positions that are representative of certain areas be based on land mass or population?
Well, because we are divided into 18 precincts, what you would have to find is the best configuration of the 6. It's going to be regional.
Okay.
So we would look to have 6 to the south and west. Those generally considered were more open areas, but a lot of development going on there. There's a committee that's set up apart from the Charter Commission to decide exactly how that would be configured. So it would be an objective, separate process. But again, I believe it would lead to more representation. And that's always a good thing, especially for somebody like me who supports representative government, town meeting form of government.
So on the charter, were there any things that you felt didn't go far enough, things that you would have liked to do more of, or things that you, in retrospect, maybe wouldn't have pushed so hard on?
You know, I don't think anyone pushed hard on anything. I think the process was wonderful.
Well, I didn't mean it that way.
No, that's okay. My perspective, of course, I'm the vice president of a conservation group in town called the Pine Barrens Alliance. So clearly, I have an environmental interest beyond maybe some of the other members, candidates. So I pushed at one point for what's called rights of nature. And rights of nature is a very interesting concept, but basically what it is that our rivers and streams, our natural resources, our aquifer, in a sense, have their own rights. And if you infringe upon those, you should be held accountable. You should not be allowed to pollute the water or taint rivers or clear-cut certain lands where we benefit from the trees and the topography. And rights of nature is a new legal principle that's happening all around the world. And I had done some research in it as an environmentalist. I knew about it, and I thought it would be a good protection for the town. In a way, it's a perfect thing in a charter because it's a principle of what we believe in and what we want to do. And I think most people in town would like to preserve the quality of life and the environment we have. And this would have been one way to accomplish that. And now some people saw it as radical, and when there was criticism of it or fear that it would lead to excess litigation, it was removed. Did I fight about that? No, I think it's a concept that people need to be educated about. And I think this process in itself will educate them about it, and we may be moving toward that in the future. Even Ohio, the Cincinnati area, recently passed that to try to protect the Ohio River. Florida has a few instances where municipalities have tried to protect their water systems and things like that.
Sure. I think it's very interesting that has come up because you're right, very few people have ever heard of it. And when you explain it that way, it kind of makes sense. Does a river have a right to not be polluted?
I also have, I believe it's along the line too of our awakening to the civil rights of other peoples and types. For example, 300 years ago, black people didn't have any rights, or they were considered a half right or something. And then we became aware of that. And now even animal rights. People used to think that animals could be used and abused any way they want. And now animal rights are clearly understood and respected. And I think the same way nature, maybe even more so, should have that same respect and legal foundation.
Do you think that for this charter that the average citizen understands enough about the way that we're run now, the way this would alter it slightly, to make an informed vote, yes or no, on this charter?
That's always a challenge. I think, to backtrack in a little ways, that we don't do a good job, or any kind of job, at educating people that come to this community. They might have a ballpark general notion that we're Plymouth and the Pilgrims and things like that, but they don't really have a concrete understanding of our form of government and how it allows for so much participation and how it's structured. And I think that's incumbent on the government and others too, but mainly the government, to reach out and make that happen. One of the things I'd like to do as a select board person is make an annual event where all of the committees and boards are on the waterfront at tables, giving out information, answering questions, celebrate this wonderful legacy, because we are the foundation of democratic America. The charter that the Pilgrims signed, the compact that is, became the basis for our Constitution in Massachusetts, and then for the country as a whole. That's worth celebrating. It's also worth knowing. So anyone that comes to town should get a welcome wagon sense of that.
I was just going to say that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I really believe you got to be proactive that way. But yes, a lot of people are stumbling over the fact that to understand the charter changes, you should have a little bit of understanding of the foundation of it. Right. The League of Women Voters presentation, which I saw last night, does that. It addresses first the governmental structure, and then it starts talking about the changes to that. That is a lot for people to take in. So it's easy to both either approve it or criticize it from simplistic perspectives when it's really a complex document, but I think a positive document.
And if I can just piggyback off that into something kind of related, it's very related. It's the lack of voter participation. And it's not just in Plymouth, it's everywhere. No. All of this is connected.
Yeah.
So how do we circle that square?
Well, it has to be done comprehensively. It has to be in every element of how we run the government, how we educate people about the government, how our institutions work. People that come here, we need to educate them. I'm sorry, could you say the question again?
It's just voter participation is just so low. And it seems that people are just like, it's just overwhelming. I don't even understand it. I'm not even going to bother. Well, or my vote doesn't even matter anyway. They're going to do whatever they want.
In some ways, I think we should take more pride in this form of government. When we reached the 400th anniversary, I was really hoping that our governmental legacy, this town meeting representation and how it connected, as I said before, to our national government should have been celebrated. I was hoping they'd get an institution, a higher education institution, to come in and make us an exemplar of voting. I'd like to see voting kiosks in every neighborhood. And so people could make it the community thing it's supposed to be. Now, we're so big and broad and spread out, that's difficult to do. But I'd like to see us move in that direction, not keep whining about participation, but in every way we can, doing things to increase that participation. And I just don't think we've made a real effort. Apart from little signs that say vote Saturday or something, not much goes on in there.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Question number 4. It's kind of twofold. It's on economic development and tourism. Tourism and economic development are crucial aspects of Plymouth's current and future financial health. What priorities do you place on these areas, and what are the drawbacks that concern you?
Well, I guess I'll reflect again about what I think we miss out on. So we do have this legacy, and I think we're kind of complacent about it to a degree, of the Pilgrims, of that whole story. And that bring people from all over the world to this town. But we also have, I think, of equal importance and maybe more importance in the long term, an environmental legacy. This is the center of and includes some of the greatest sections of a globally rare ecoregion. That's what my group, the Pine Barrens, is involved in, that has created and established rare species and rare geological situations and coastal plain ponds. We have 450 ponds in this town. And that is a legacy that I believe we're not taking advantage of. Ecotourism and its use to also slow growth could really be a tool to achieve a lot of the goals that we want as a community. A way to slow down growth, a way to preserve our quality of life, a way to protect our natural resources. So in terms of tourism, I think we're missing the ball there. We have, by the way, and I wonder how many of the candidates, besides myself or the members of the Select Board, have visited Miles Standish State Forest, the second largest, I believe, state forest in Massachusetts, the second oldest in the state. And they get close to 500,000 visitors a year camping on their grounds. But who has visited it? Who goes to it? I've been making the analogy that if you were the mayor of Orlando and someone said, why don't you do more with Disney World? And you go, oh, I don't need to do with Disney World. They got their own thing going on. We should be taking advantage of those environmental resources, a state park, a state forest. Some of the most important environmental groups in the state are located here. Wildlands Trust, Manomet's an international group, many other groups, the Tidmarsh Wildlife Sanctuary. We don't fully take advantage of those, and I think they have so many benefits beyond just the aesthetic or environmental. They really have a way, as I talked about before, green infrastructure of preserving our community and laying the foundation for the future, because I don't think we want our future to be just the eventual encroachment of development over the entire town. I think that's not why people came here. They came for this wonderful mix we have. We have, you know, I'm passionate about the community. We have so much here, but it's all at risk. It's all at risk unless we have a long-range plan, that our master plan is redone, that we have a vision for what areas we're really going to protect and what areas we're going to develop, and that's got to be as comprehensive as the master plan. So I don't know if I addressed your question there.
Okay,
Maybe,
well,
yeah.
no, you're answering in terms of how you want to answer the question, and I understand completely. On economic development, it's people complain, residents complain all the time about taxes.
Yeah.
And the offset of taxes for residents is getting taxes from industry,
Right.
or businesses. So how do you bring that into your whole realm of thinking that doesn't?
Yeah, I've had a lot of.
Yeah, go.
I've had a lot of conversations with people in the community that are business owners or landowners or things like that about what are the reasons why we seem to go on bended knee begging for business. And I would think, from a simplistic point of view, that this would be a great place to have your business, whatever it is. So I've always been wondering about that. And in a lot of ways, I thought it was that we don't have enough pride in our community, that we seem to be on bended knee, say, please come here, anything you want we'll do, instead of looking for the best, looking for the highest quality. But there are other issues I found that are there that are obstructing it. And one of the biggest, I believe, is accessibility. And by accessibility, I mean that we are at the end of, I don't know how long it is, but for whatever reason, they always called it the expressway, right? From Boston to the Cape. We are at the end of the so-called expressway, and it's never been an expressway. And there have been a few times we tried to fix it. There was the big dig in Boston, but it's never been quick, fast, or let's go to Plymouth because it's an easy ride. So what I would like to see is this improve accessibility. And one of the ways to do that is to be honest about that we don't have good accessibility, that businesses might not want to locate here, or employees of good businesses might not want to live here because it's so difficult to get here. You have to either take a bus that right now you're not guaranteed a seat, or you get on a train. No, I'm sorry, there are no trains. As a matter of fact, the train station we love to promote at Cortage is not really a train station, will never be a train station. It's the spur that trains have to back into from Kingston. So we could do some simple things and some long-term things. And one of them would be rebrand the Kingston station Kingston/Plymouth or Plymouth/Kingston. And so people could, in Boston, would say, oh, there's a train that goes to Plymouth and gets there in a reasonable amount of time. Because if you have to take a train to Plymouth, to Cortage, you have to go to Kingston first and then back up, add another 45 minutes to an hour on your trip. It's very silly. You could probably walk that distance. So then, once you establish that rebranded Kingston-Plymouth, expand that into an intermodal site where you have a number of buses. You get some subsidized buses that go to Boston on a regular basis. You know you're going to get a seat because the train is still limited even on that one line. But then add shuttle buses, Gatra or otherwise, that go to all the key places in Plymouth. So we really need to do that to make this community more accessible. I've also talked, maybe fantasized a bit, about a high-speed ferry, but not out of the harbor, because it's very difficult to get out of the harbor, but over where Burt's is now, that wasteland of Burt's that hopefully we're going to tear that down soon. But over on that, you can get a direct access out of the harbor. You don't have to go through the channel. You don't have to go through Gurnet and Saquewish and Clark Island. You can go directly in, essentially, to Boston Harbor. I know there's some challenges to that, but it's worth exploring. So accessibility, I think, is a key economic issue to this town.
And one more thing on economics, the whole idea of having a convention center that's somewhere in Plymouth proper.
That's the big question, where?
Well, so that's my question to you is, would you support a convention center, especially if it means we can get people into Plymouth during the shoulder season, as well as during the summer? And what are your pros and cons thoughts about it?
We'll have to be very creative. There is, in my opinion, no place within the downtown area where people would like to be with a convention center that's large enough or wouldn't impact in a negative fashion that quality, the character, the small town character that I like to see retained on the waterfront. But I can see some other areas. I mean, there's been some discussion of the development of the Landers site, which straddles Route 44 between Commerce Way and Cherry Street. Now, that's an eyesore. It's an ongoing business, a successful business. But if that could be turned, if that property could be turned into a hotel convention center, it seemed like a great location because it would be down the highway. But I'm not against a convention center at all. I think it would be a great idea. Just location is a very critical point to there. That doesn't negatively impact the communities that exist or the character that exists. I think we can do it. I'm an optimist. I believe that there is a way to do a lot of the things, as complex as they seem, for this community.
Okay, and one other thing on tourism is there's a very good chance that a small cruise line will be able to come into the harbor starting this summer. What are your feelings about that?
I think we have to be very careful about impacting our existing businesses, especially our lobstermen, our shell fishermen. I know that issue is being discussed now. I was a little naive at first about it. I actually took when I was a reporter for the Old Colony, the last cruise ship I believe to come into the harbor I was on to write a story. It came from Salem. It was a bit smaller than this one. Came from Salem. And I wanted to see what that was like because they were kind of thinking about that back then.
Yeah.
And it came in. It had to be on the Brewster. Is it Brewster? It had to be in the commercial docks over by the yacht club. And even that ship, which is I think like 40 feet less wide than the one that they're promoting, was kind of tough to get in and kind of tough to get on the dock, and had to be jury rigged a little bit. I think what I would be, I think they're going to do, and I would be in favor of a couple of test runs with real-time evaluation. One of the possibilities as well is not coming into the docks, which are used by lobstermen and all, and they have very specific uses that we don't want to impact, was maybe to have them moored in the harbor a little farther out and come in on a tender or something. I don't think it's really, it's more of a symbolic thing because we're never going to be able to have enough of that kind of business, cruise ships, coming all the way into the harbor to truly impact the community economically or otherwise. It just is a kind of symbolic thing that would look good, but I don't think it would be a true economic factor. So let's be very careful about not negatively impacting the businesses we do have. And speaking of that, our lobstermen and our shell fishermen, the town, I think, should be supporting the promotion of that, because when people come to a small New England community, one of the things they love to see is a real port, and we have a real port. So let's somehow make that available, either with tours or other things. I think it'd be very attractive.
And my last question on the blue economy. Now, we started the economic developer, executive director Stephen Cole had the first blue economy convention last year.
Right, I attended.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on our blue economy?
Well, I think it's one, it straddles a lot of different areas, but a high-tech business, an innovative business is something we, of course, should facilitate as much as we can. And one of the things I asked of the people that are behind some of the businesses that already exist here, blue economy businesses, is the town doing enough to provide the infrastructure or the facilities or the plan to truly make that happen? And right now, we just have a conceptual idea that this would be great, but it's going to take a lot of planning. But that's kind of my attitude about all the businesses we're not getting, is that you have to commit to that. If we really want a blue economy here, let's commit to it. Let's have the facilities, let's have the plans, let's have the discussions now. Let's not wait to see it happen on its own. Let's commit to that. Same with kind of green businesses. We've talked about in the past the 1,000 acres in South Plymouth. I think that would be a great place for a small green economy businesses. Set low in the land, gravel, roads and things, and use that to then preserve the rest of it. So let's commit to things like this and really push forward on them. Let's not just talk about them. We talk about a lot of things, but I think we need to push forward on a lot of things to make them happen.
Okay. Fifth question. Last question. There are 6 individuals running for 2 3-year terms on the Select Board. Each brings a different set of experiences and history. Given that one of the Select Board's general powers and duties is to adopt policy directives and guidelines, how do you balance your own viewpoints and biases to serve the greater good of the entire town?
I think it's pretty simple. Again, I go back to the inclusivity. I don't believe I have the answers, but I believe I have the attitude that can find the answers in the community that we have. I believe in listening more, in more transparency, in more open meetings, in more meetings in general. A lot of times you get in an elected board, and I've seen this personally and otherwise, and it becomes us versus them. We know and you don't know kind of thing. I think we got to get rid of that attitude. But I truly believe, and this campaign process has underscored that the answers are in the group. That's why I believe in town meeting. I believe in the many, not the few. I believe in the community's voice filtered through this process, gets you to what they call the genius of America, which is compromise. So though I have decided views on a lot of things, that does not mean I'm closed-minded by any stretch. As a matter of fact, I respect people with passion about their ideas. And that's what I would like to see. That's what I would like to facilitate. I think that's been a little bit lacking, that there's been a sense that people aren't welcome into the process. I think we've got to fight that all the time because, as you know, people don't have the best sense of government. Politicians, whatever level they're on, are probably the least liked people in the country. So why am I doing this? But that's something we have to fight all the time. And on both sides, too. You shouldn't, from the outside, from a residential point of view, think that the people in government are necessarily corrupt or necessarily biased. But by the same extent, setting the tone should be the government, welcoming people in and respecting their opinions. Because just in this past few months that I've been campaigning, I've learned so many things, including about the harbor and the cruise ship and all. I've learned a lot more nuanced detail just from getting out there and asking people. And hopefully, I'm someone that people feel is accessible, is willing to listen to them. And if they don't think that, I'm going to make every effort, if I'm elected, to change their minds.
Okay. Thank you. So you have 5 minutes or so to talk about anything that we haven't talked about, and you can speak directly into the camera and tell the citizens out there why they should vote for Frank Mand for
No,
select person.
I have like a little speech.
Go
Is that
right
okay?
ahead. Read your speech.
My speech. Let's see, where is it?
There's
Here
your
it is.
speech.
Look right in the camera. Could this be an election as simple as a choice between optimists and cynics? I'd argue that case. Cynics, by definition, are short-term thinkers. Optimists have faith in the future. Cynics are focused on problems. Optimists on solutions. Cynics see opponents. Optimists look for partners. I've been a Little League president, a board member of the Task Force to End Homelessness. I'm on the Charter Commission and the Planning Board. I help run a regional conservation organization and have written several successful grants bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars and involving dozens of partners. I'm an optimist. I believe that most of the expertise we need to keep the Plymouth we love from being hauled away one truckload at a time is right here. It's you. I believe in the many, not the few. You might call me naive or even worse, idealistic. But isn't that what leaders are supposed to be? Our existing charter says that the Select Board is the long-range planning board of the town. But do you have a sense what that plan is? I like the quote, "If you fail to plan, you plan to fail." But even the best plans will fail without real commitment. I hope you will partner with me on a new plan for this town's future. I hope you share the belief that we can, indeed we must, do better. I don't love politics, but I am passionate about Plymouth, all of Plymouth. My name is Frank Mand, optimist and candidate for Select Board. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Frank. I forgot to, I've insisted that every single person I've interviewed says you will be voting yes on the charter versus no, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. You just didn't answer the question.
I talked about how much,
Yes.
how positive it was,
That's
I
fine.
thought.
Okay.
But yes, not only do I think it's positive, but I will vote for it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I would like to wish you best of luck through your campaign and in the election. For our viewers, thank you for joining us. If you're interested in watching replays of this interview, please visit our website, PACTV.org, for replay times and online viewing options, including PACTV's on-demand and streaming service, PACTV Prime. And please make your choices heard by voting in the election on Saturday, May 20th. Thank you and good day.